I don't know when you guys switched. I know by 2014, my first year with the Clippers, that you had switched to heavy drop coverage. But in some ways, I feel like those teams, because of your defensive success, changed the modern NBA. And I really mean that, because for the first 7, 8 years of my career, the 5-man, more often than not, and certainly teams would play 5 men back in pick and roll coverage, but not to the extent that you guys eventually did with Roy. But more often than not, teams would have the 5-man up, especially if you were, guarding anybody that could shoot off the dribble. They had the 5-man up in pick and roll, and then you relied heavily on the low man. If it's a spread pick and roll, you'd bring the guy over, he would bump the roller at the nail, but the roller would always get behind the defense. And then you guys started basically in pick and roll, Roy all the way in the back. That's how everybody plays now. And I even remember, like, it was my first year with the Clippers. We played you guys on a road trip. And I remember just coming off pick and rolls and dribble handoffs, feeling like I was wide open. And I shot 4 for 18 that game. Like, because teams have taught it better, whether it's snaking or putting somebody in jail. Like, nobody was teaching that back then. And so you'd come off and you'd kind of get in this no man's land of like, I can't get all the way to the rim, and I've surpassed, the pull-up jumper. So I'm taking these tough leaners or these tough floaters, and you've got you and Lance and George, all these guys, bigger, stronger, longer guys. And I really do believe that, like, when you guys made that switch and put Roy in heavy drops, like, that changed how everybody guarded in the NBA.
Yeah, and we, like, back then you could be physical too. You know what I mean? You could be physical. We would jump into, whether it was coming off a DHO or a pin down, like, we were physical getting through that screen. And so it helped Roy kind of be back, because 9 times out of 10 we were getting over that screen or getting through that screen, and so he never had to be up. But yeah, I mean, that was our coverage, man. That was our coverage. Keep Roy in the hole. He'll protect everything. And at that point, like, teams, it was starting to get to that analytical game where, like, layups or threes. Yeah. And mid-range was like, we'll take it. You shoot a mid-range, we'll take it, because we're going to rear view contest. And that's a hard shot to make when you're flying off a screen, and now you got to slow down to get balance, and then you got a guy chasing you from behind, so you're trying to see where is he coming from, and now you're trying to lock back onto the rim. That's a tough shot to make. And so that was that's what we were like forcing guys to do. Like, if you're going to be comfortable here, it's just going to be a long night. Like, we're willing to lose that way if you make shots in this range right here, but that's the shot that we're going to give you.
We didn't make the change in LA till 2016, which was my 3rd year there. And it was so foreign to me, because with Dwight, and some of it was just Dwight was so mobile, we always had him up, and DeAndre was the same way. And so we just relied on that backside low man, the nail guy, whatever. Even with strong side pick and rolls, we didn't always ice, so you'd get that corner bump. And for me, is, when I would guard like a CJ McCollum and he's coming off and he's shooting floaters in mid-range, like, it was a foreign thing, and it was hard for me to trust. When you're guarding CJ and he's hitting shots, like, it's a hard thing to trust. Did you guys initially, I know you mentioned the physicality and you guys were able to get through, but initially, was there any, like, turning back to the coaching staff every time somebody hit a mid-range pull-up? Because for our team that first year, it was like everybody, and now everybody runs it, but it was initially a little bit hard to sort of justify in the moment. Whereas when you look at the analytics, you're like, okay, now it makes sense.
Yeah, to be honest, there wasn't many teams that burnt us on that. You know what I mean? There wasn't many teams that, like, we had a rough, like, the games we lost, the score was like in the 80s. You know what I mean? Like, that team wasn't making shots and we weren't making shots. Like, we didn't really get killed in that range. You know what I mean? We were really good. And if that was the shot teams were going to take, they weren't efficient there because of the rear view and us getting through. Like, the teams weren't killing us in that mid range area of shooting floaters, and there wasn't a lot of guys that really shot that that mid range float game, or it wasn't that many guys, or especially the guards that got to that float range. So we were good.
I I don't want to characterize you as a late bloomer in the NBA because that's not. But I do remember in 2012, the lockout year, we played you guys in the first round, and you were in Indy, I was in Orlando, and there was some possessions that I had to guard you, and generally, like, you would just post me up and shoot a turnaround jumper, and you either made it or you missed it. I mean, and then Stan was like, "All right, I'm gonna mimic JJ's minutes with Leandro Barbosa's minutes," So it was like, "All right, that's fine." But I do remember, there was a possession. It was during a free throw or coming out of a timeout or something, where I asked you a question and you were just like, "Man, I need to have the ball in my hands more." And I was like, "Okay." And everyone in Indy was so high on you, and everyone around the league was like, "Oh, this guy's going to be really good." And to me, I think what has been impressive about your growth, and honestly, what is sort of untapped, or tapped all of your potential, is your ball handling. And that's such an underrated part of your game. I don't know if you had that at Fresno State. I don't know if you had that in college. I'm not even sure if you had it in your rookie year, because I don't know if they gave you the opportunity to do it. But that's the part of your game where you became very difficult to guard when you tighten your handle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was everything I had to learn. Everything I had to learn. Like, as a kid, I was just starting out to play, like, organized basketball, and I was the tallest kid, and it 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 used to kill me inside that they would put me in the post, and I always saw myself as being a guard. Like, I would watch Kobe, I would watch T-Mac, I would watch you know all the long wings, and watch how they operated on the perimeter. And I was like, man, that's who I am. That's who I want to be. Like, I want to be a guard. I want to be a wing. I want to, like, there's value in my size and to be able to handle it. So early on, like in Indiana, and again, I wasn't a defender. Like, defense was, I would say, the last part that came to me as a player. I wasn't good defensively. I had slow feet. Um, I had a knack for being in the right spot, but I wasn't good on the ball. And at the time, we had Jim O'Brien as our head coach, and he always would tell me, like, if you want to get on the floor, like, you got to play defense. And that was it. That's when the light bulb blinked for me, that, like, all right, I gotta learn how to play defense. This has gotta be my knack. I gotta, like, be special on the defensive side. And that was the way of seeing the floor. Like, that's when I started getting minutes, when I started defending. And then I got really good at that. And then now it's like, all right, now I'm on the floor. Like, I need touches. Like, because for a young guy, you get stuck in a corner. Like, that becomes your offense. Every play that they drew up, I knew where I was going to be at. There was no question of me asking, like, oh, what's the play? Like, what are we in? I knew whatever it was, I'm in a corner. And so it was just like, all right, like, how do I start to get pick and rolls? Like, how do I start to bring the ball up? Okay, I gotta get better with my dribbles. I gotta get better with my handles. Like, I started to increase my volume on practice days and the summers of shooting threes. Like, how do I get good? If I'm going to be a space out guy, like, how do I get good at shooting threes? How do I get consistent? So I started doing that. So everything, it was just an involvement, but it was just me being hungry about it. Like, I'm not going to be okay with just being on the floor and then I can't showcase what I could do. And that's really when it changed for me. And then when Danny got hurt and went out, it was like, all right, it's go time. Like, everything that I've worked on, everything that I've put hours in the gym and these long summers, this is my time. And I went for it, and it paid out.
I've just Tommy, real quick. It's interesting because there's a lot of players that have said similar comments to me on the basketball floor.
Mhm.
And I don't know whether or not they put in the work, but there's no way you're going to get the ball in your hands more if you don't put in the work. So that's a credit to you. We hope you had fun with us today. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button.